The argument that my book makes is that the confrontation of the digital and the print is not a catastrophe to be feared and mourned, but an opportunity to ask new questions, to think about what literature has been in the past, what it is today, and how it's changing into the future. The digital humanities don't invalidate previous approaches, and they don't merely continue the approaches, but that they make you work a little bit differently. You still work on the same materials. I work on literature. This is a book about literature. We're still going to study literature. We're not shifting our focus. But we just might work slightly differently. So you're a Blake scholar. Now you have access to all digitized versions of everything that Blake ever wrote in all their versions in one place. That's different than having to spend your entire life globe-trotting. Maybe you're never going to see all of the editions of the work of the poet who is the subject of your research. You're a Blake scholar and you share your research on Twitter. It's a little bit different than sharing your research in expensive, limited-run, peer-reviewed publications that only come out once a year. Same example. You're a Blake scholar, but you collaborate with a computer scientist in order to track changes in vocabulary or style in Blake's career. So instead of a model where you can do all of your work alone in your office, you have to work with people who are coming at it from different disciplines. It can change, digital humanities can change what we study. Still looking at literature, but maybe we're looking at new forms of literature. We're following it from the page to maybe we study narrative more generally, and we study narrative in video games or in digital fiction, or interactivity becomes something we study. We're interested in narrative, but we follow narrative as it leaves the forms that we're used to seeing it in. Digital humanities also, if you're working on the same material, you can ask new questions of that material. So the great example of this is, let's say you're a scholar of the 19th century novel. You've probably read maybe a fraction of a percent of all of the novels that were published in the 19th century. You can write an algorithm that can ask your research question of all novels published in that century if you have them digitized. Suddenly you're actually working in the entire literary sphere of that period, whereas before you're working at a tiny representative sample of that world. So it's these sort of shifts. You get new questions and new perspectives. It's not totally reinventing the game. You're still asking research questions. You're still interested in the traditional humanities approach of let's look for complexity and look for problems. It doesn't mean that we have to adopt scientific methodologies of just seeking truth and hard answers, but it changes. Literature is the pioneer field in digital humanities, and there's a really simple reason for that. It's that literature is easy to digitize. So it's easy to turn letters into computable data, and so we've been, I think, the most successful humanities discipline. Literature departments have done really well in studying new forms and expanding the notion of narrative and teaching coding. English departments in the 80s and 90s were where theory happened. In the 2000s and into the present, English departments have been the places where digital humanities happen for the most part. I think the place where the most dramatic change will be seen in literary studies will be in the classroom. I think the research that we do will be recognizable. It won't change radically, but the methodologies will be different, and everyone will be comfortable doing digital literary studies. But we will be teaching more in the classroom than essay writing. Students will make more than essays, and I think focusing on making, not just critical thought, not just in the form of an essay, but critical thought through creating digital narratives through coding.